Chapter 7, Immigrants and Urbanization. If you take a look at your study guide, question number 1 is asking between 1870 and 1920 about blank Europeans immigrated to the United States. The new immigrants, section 1. Where did the immigrants come from? Please read along with me. Between 1870 and 1920, about 20 million Europeans immigrated to the United States, many from Eastern and Southern Europeans. So in your answer to number 1, about 20 million Europeans immigrated to the U.S. If you look at the map on the left, this is showing you where all the immigrants came from. This area right here, which is all considered to be new immigrants. Why did they come here? Question number 2, if you look at, asks you, immigrants came here because of, and you have letters A, B, and C. If you take a look, you can simply copy these down. They came here to escape religious persecution, improve their economic situation, and experienced greater freedom in the United States. Most European immigrants arrived on the East Coast. Please take a minute and write those down, and also keep in mind at any point, please pause the recording. Question number 3 on your study guide is asking you, how many people came from Asia and what did they help build? Smaller number of immigrants came from Asia. They arrived on the West Coast. About 200,000 Chinese came between 1851 and 1883, and then many Chinese helped build the first transcontinental railroad. Please write down points number 2 and number 3 here for question number 3 on your study guide. Question number 4 is asking you, in 1898, what did the U.S. annex and what group of people came to the U.S.? This is right here in the title of this slide. Several thousand Japanese immigrants came to the United States when the U.S. annexed Hawaii in 1898. Annex means to simply take over. Please write that down for question number 4. We'll skip this slide because there is nothing on your study guide regarding this one. Take a look at question number 5. How many Mexican immigrants came by 1910? Read along with me. Mexicans come to the U.S. too. Some became U.S. citizens when the nation acquired Mexican territory in 1848 as a result of the Mexican War. About 1 million Mexicans arrived between 1910 and 1930 to escape turmoil in their country. So question number 5, you can write down 1 million Mexicans arrived. This slide here is just showing you a graphic of where the immigrants came from and what years they arrived in the United States. Question number 6 on your study guide is asking, describe Ellis Island and Angel Island. This is Ellis Island. Most Europeans immigrants to the U.S. arrived in New York, and they had to pass through an immigration station located on Ellis Island. So you can write down for number 6, it was a immigration station, and it was in New York. Sorry for the typo here, that should be New York Harbor. When they arrived here, they had to pass inspection, and then it was determined whether or not they could enter the country. If they had serious health problems or diseases, they would have been sent home. Here's some more pictures. Now for the description of Angel Island, you can say it's the same station, but it's on the West Coast, and it's located in San Francisco. Please write that down for number 6. Question number 7 is asking, where did the immigrants settle? On this slide here, this answers that question. Many immigrants settled in communities with other immigrants from the same country. They also formed organizations to help each other. So please write that down for number 7, that they settled in communities with other immigrants. Question number 8 is asking, what is meant by a melting pot? Immigration restrictions. America called a melting pot, fact that many cultures and races had blended, but many immigrants refused to give up their culture. So what is meant by a melting pot is many cultures and races blended together. Please write that down for number 8. Question number 9. What were some Americans' reactions to new immigrants? And then define nativism. On this slide you can see some Americans didn't like so many immigrants living in the U.S. Here is your definition. Nativism. Obvious preference for native-born Americans. Nativism gave to the rise of anti-immigrant groups, also led to a demand for immigration restrictions. Please summarize this slide for number 9. Number 10 is asking you to describe the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. You should already be familiar with this because we went through this and did a close reading assignment. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. Chinese immigrants worked for low wages. Labor groups pressured politicians to restrict Asian immigration and then banned all but a few Chinese immigrants, and it was not lifted until 1943. So what you can write down for number 10 is, due to labor pressure, Chinese immigrants were all but banned until 1943. Chinese immigrants in San Francisco naturalization classes. So this is the type of classroom that they would sit in order to become citizens of the United States. Question number 11, describe the causes of the Gentlemen's Agreement. Okay, so on this slide, the Gentlemen's Agreement. In San Francisco, all Chinese, Japanese, and Korean children were placed in special Asian schools that led to an anti-American riots in Japan. In exchange for President Roosevelt persuading San Francisco officials to stop separation policy, the Japanese agreed to limit emigration to the United States. So the causes of the Gentlemen's Agreement is simply that the Asians were all separated, and this led to riots in Japan. And in order to stop it, Roosevelt made a deal. So you can summarize that for question number 11. Section 2, the challenges of urbanization. Question number 12 is asking you to define urbanization. Urbanization is the rapid growth of cities. Many immigrants settled in the cities in the early 1900s. They settled mostly in the Northeast and Midwest cities to find jobs in factories and businesses. So when you define urbanization, you need to include the rapid growth of cities. Many immigrants settled in cities, and they did so for factory work. Actually, number 13 is asking, where did most immigrants settle and why? You can write that down or draw an arrow if you already wrote it down, that they settled in cities for jobs. By 1910, immigrants made up over half the populations in 18 major American cities. Question 14 is asking you, what is the Americanization movement? Read along with me. A way for immigrants to learn about the United States. Schools taught them English, American history, and government, and helped them become citizens. Please summarize this slide for question number 14. I have a bonus question for you. What other group of people in the United States did we try to quote unquote Americanize them? And what term did we use to describe that Americanization? Please write that down for question number 14 as well, if you remember. Question 15 is asking what other groups moved to the cities and why. And then it asks what is the Great Migration. Read along with me. Others also moved to the cities. The two groups you're looking at are farmers and African Americans. Farmers moved to the city because they lost their jobs to machines. African Americans came here because that's where the jobs were. So when you are defining what is the Great Migration, it is the mass movement of African Americans from the South to the North for jobs. And they settled in cities. Please write that down for question number 15. Question number 16 is asking what was an urban problem and then describe the new types of housing that was created. On this slide, it comes out and states shortage in housing. There was not enough houses for all these new peoples moving up north. So the way that they settled this is two new forms of housing came out. One is the row house, single family dwelling that shared side walls with other houses, and then a tenement, which is a multi-family urban house and often is overcrowded and unsanitary. So please write that down for number 16. Here are pictures of the different houses and how overcrowded it became. Mass transit. Question number 17 is asking, describe the mass transit and the purpose. Mass transit, cities developed it because it was designed to move large numbers of people along fixed routes. So you can go ahead and write that down. Describe mass transit. And what was the purpose? It was a transportation system to aid in moving large number of people around the city.